By the end of 1914, the Great War was supposed to be over. Millions were already dead, yet the conflict was nowhere near its end. Across Europe, vast armies faced each other, locked in a brutal embrace. They weren't advancing, they weren't retreating, they were just there. World War I had stopped moving. And when the movement stopped, the real slaughter began.
History is not just the past. It is the bridge to who we are today.
When the war first erupted, leaders on all sides had promised their people a swift, decisive victory. "You'll be home by Christmas," was the common refrain. But Christmas of 1914 came and went, and the soldiers were still in the field. They were trapped, not so much by the enemy, but by the war itself, a machine that had taken on a life of its own. This wasn't a failure of courage or will, it was a catastrophic failure of old-world tactics colliding with new, terrifying technology. 19th century strategies of massed infantry charges were met by 20th century machine guns that could side down hundreds of men in minutes. Artillery, more powerful than ever before, could obliterate entire units before they even caught a glimpse of the enemy. In this new, horrific equation, defense had become infinitely stronger than attack. To survive this maelstrom of steel, soldiers did the only thing they could: they dug into the earth. At first, these were just simple, temporary ditches. But as weeks turned into months, these ditches deepened, widened, and connected until a vast, hideous network of trenches scarred the face of Europe, stretching uninterrupted from the Swiss border all the way to the North Sea. Life in these trenches was a special kind of hell, a world away from the heroic posters back home. It was a world of mud, thick and constant, that could swallow a manhole. It was a world of giant, audacious rats that fed on the dead. A world of filth, lice, and rampant disease. And death was a constant, casual companion. Soldiers lived, ate, and slept beside the corpses of their comrades. Some men died without a bullet ever touching them, victims of sickness or exposure. And many, many others simply lost their minds. The ceaseless, deafening roar of artillery shelling did something terrible to the human psyche. It shattered nerves and broke spirits. At the time, they called it shell shock. We have a different name for it today: post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD. World War I wasn't just killing bodies by the million, it was systematically destroying souls. Since neither side could achieve a decisive breakthrough on the battlefield, the generals, desperate for a new path to victory, embraced a chillingly simple strategy: attrition. The new goal was to bleed the enemy white, to kill so many of their soldiers that their nation would simply collapse from the loss. It was war as a grim, industrial process of extermination. In 1916, the German command chose the French fortress town of Verdun as the focal point for this new strategy. Their objective wasn't to capture the town, but to turn it into a meat grinder, to force the French to defend it at all costs, and in doing so, to bleed the French army to death. The battle raged for nearly 10 months, resulting in an estimated 700,000 casualties. At Verdun, victory was no longer the goal, only endurance mattered. To relieve the pressure on the French, the British launched their own massive offensive along the river Somme. They believed a week-long, colossal artillery bombardment would obliterate the German defenses and allow their infantry to simply walk across no man's land. They were tragically wrong. On the very first day of the Battle of the Somme, nearly 60,000 British soldiers became casualties. 60,000 in a single day. It remains the bloodiest day in the history of the British Army. The generals knew the horrific cost of these assaults. They saw the casualty lists, yet they ordered the attacks to continue, again and again and again. Why? Because to stop meant admitting that the entire strategy was a failure. And in the high-stakes political climate of total war, admitting failure was simply not an option. By the end of 1916, the war was no longer about glorious charges or clever maneuvers. It was a grim contest of who could survive the longest, who could endure the most pain. The stalemate on the Western Front seemed unbreakable. But to break it, humanity was about to unleash weapons it had never dared to use before. The war had stopped moving, but it was about to evolve into something even more terrifying. And when it did, the world would never be the same again. Thanks for watching, and be sure to follow for the next part of our series.